Hello, and welcome to another episode of Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers.
By writers.
To keep you writing.
I'm Nick.
I'm Will.
I'm Sameem.
And I'm Shingai.
And we got the East Coast crew back this week, coming off a hot interview with Jenna Udden. But kicking off tonight, Will, what do you got for us?
Well, tonight is going to be just a fun episode about what inspires us and what's moving us, what we're reading, and also where we are with our writing. So it's going to be a little bit of everything, because the heart of the episode is actually going to be about creativity. So my first question is for everyone, and it is, I want you to describe what creativity means to you. What is creativity to you? And not in 3 words for once. We're switching it up. I just want to know, how would you describe creativity? And we'll start with our founder, Nick Bright. Nick, take it away.
All right. So if I had to define the word creative, that to me, that is creating something that isn't seen in the space of normal, mundane, every day. Because if you think about what being creative is, creative bleeds into everything that we do. It's not just the arts. It is scheduling. It is trying to figure out things for kids. It is trying to go to work and figure out processes for work and things like that, right? So being creative is just a way to view and create things that are abstract or out of the normal for everyday life.
Sameem, how would you describe creativity to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of that jives with me. I think a big part of it, and I don't think this is 100% it, but I think a big part of it is problem solving. Whether that problem is like Nick was saying, I got to figure out how to get my kids' schedules to work with things that I have to do. Or the problem is I have this idea that I want to explore in my head and I want to share it with other people and I want to get them to experience what I'm experiencing. And I think that is very much, at least for me, is a big part of art. But cooking is a way, I don't cook that much and I've started to more recently. And that's a big way where once you start moving away from a recipe and are making things just from memory more and more, where it feels creative, where you're doing it because this is the way you want to experience the food. This is how you want other people to experience it with you. I could talk all day about this, so I will pause there.
I love it. Shingai?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is curiosity. Just because that's what I've been thinking about a lot recently, the creative well is fed by our curiosity, by our ability to pay attention to the world around us and ask questions about it. And I think that opens up opportunities to express things that we take for granted in new ways. I'm thinking about this in all of the things that y'all said, especially cooking, knowing that when I cook, I'm curious about what the spices are gonna do to the food that I'm preparing, and all of it feels like an experiment. And creativity is about experimentation too, So it's ooh, I wonder what would happen if. Or for speculative fiction or speculative writers, we ask the question, what if, all the time. So that feels like a strong basis. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump off of that. I think curiosity is the other huge part of this that drives, at least for me, drives a lot of creativity is, and to Shingai's point, the what if. Even with cooking, for me, I really don't like following recipes. I force myself to because I'm learning, but as quickly as possible, I want to move on to, hey, I'm going to put cumin in this now and see what happens. And I'm just curious, and sometimes it's not going to work. And that happens with the writing too. You decide you want to try a different way of like structuring a story, or a new type of character that you're not, or a new genre even that you don't usually work with. And it's a lot of it is like curiosity and experimentation.
Have you watched 100-Foot Journey by any chance?
No.
It's a food movie about an Indian family who immigrate to France and start cooking like Indian food at this homemade restaurant right across from this French woman's restaurant. And first of all, the visuals are phenomenal. Like if you are someone who gets excited by looking at good food, it's so great for that. But there's also a lot of that experimentation with spices in it. Yeah.
I'll have to check it out.
Okay, so now that the three of you kind of defined creativity for yourselves, I want to know, what do you do when you're feeling uncreative? How do you dig into your, how do you make yourself feel creativity? And I'm going to go with Sameem this time first.
I feel like one thing I learned relatively recently is that it probably means that I'm not sleeping enough. Unfortunately, my solution isn't to go to sleep. I have a really hard time sleeping as much as I need to. But I think that's a huge part of it. I know, like, if my brain just doesn't want to like work through, especially going back to like the problem solving bit, like if it doesn't want to work through a problem, and I'm at that part of creativity, then it's just I'm too tired, and I need to sleep. There's other things though, I think, like where if that's not the problem, like just getting out and going for a walk, like basic stuff like that, or like changing scenery, having something to eat that isn't like super heavy, but still will just like, I don't know, distract my brain. I think those are like foundational self-help things that I try to do.
I love it. Shingai, what do you do when you're not feeling creative?
I think many different things. I resonate with a lot of what Sameem said, because I'm thinking about how you could pay attention to your body needs when you're feeling like your creative well is gone, it's done. I think paying attention to your body is a big one. Like whether you've eaten, whether you're cold, whether like the basic things, whether you've slept enough. Also, it's dependent. Sometimes my creative well being blocked is because of the state of the world. And I don't know if there's anything that I can do about that. I think another thing that really helps is just in that moment, consuming art. I want to look for a different word that isn't consuming, but like it taking in art instead of trying to experiencing art. Thank you. And engaging with it. That feels like creativity that doesn't need my whole brain. Like I can watch a movie and talk about it with friends, and that feels like I'm engaging my creative brain without using all of it in the ways that I do when I'm writing a short story or a work of fiction.
I love it. And what about you, Nick? And what do you do when you're not feeling creative or you need to connect to creativity?
So I am like the binge watcher of like all things fantasy. So I will jump on Crunchyroll, find something that has 4 or 5 seasons, and just binge it until something starts striking. I think for me, just getting lost in other people's works really helps out a lot. As of recent, I've got this notebook. In fact, I have it out right now. But I keep a notebook and pen around, so any inkling of creativity that I have, and I'm not in a space to dedicate time towards it, I can write down 1 or 2 sentences, to reflect back on for later and things like that, to get it out while I can and before it leaves me, and start building upon that.
Okay. let's elaborate on some of the things that, like, Nick, you had mentioned that you like will binge watch and fantasy. So my question is then for next is, do you, for writing, this is just specifically for writing, are you watching fantasy to inspire other fantastical worlds? Or are any of you watching like science fiction if you're working on a science fiction novel to start thinking about like how you're doing things? So tell me, like, why fantasy for you, Nick, specifically, do you binge on?
I'm not a sci-fi person. Like I like and I appreciate sci-fi. I think I get too caught up in the hard sciences when they're available. So there are a lot of sci-fi shows that I like that are, a little bit more fantastical that happen. Fantasy for me, it is all about the world building and the magic systems that really pull me in the most. Understanding magic systems is like, it's the thing that consumes me when I'm reading and writing. And then world building. But I will say this, regardless of genre, if there's a strong character for me to like and be involved with and root for and all that, that will always take precedence over everything else.
And what about you, Sameem? Like, when you're like wanting to write, or you're trying to be creative, like, do you ever look at any other work and be like, okay, I'm gonna consume this because this is something that I want to work on?
I don't think I do that consciously, unless there is something that I'm working on that I feel like is in conversation with another artist's work or body, like genre that I just need to understand better. But I don't usually do that. But what I have found is that watching longer form content, which is not something I do enough of, that's more serious and out of the house too, like seeing, like going to a theater or like going to a concert, like switching up like the medium and the type of art, and going and seeing it in a different physical space affects me in a huge way. A few months ago, I went to like an open mic night, and I don't do that very often. It was like the first time in years I'd done that. And like the next week, I would just like had like a lot of words to write down, and a lot of thoughts. And so I think there's like a certain kind of energy that like gives you just like being in those spaces, even if it's a completely unrelated body of work that you're engaging with.
Cool. Shingai, so the question was, what do you consume the type of stories that you write? So speculative fiction, science fiction, or fantasy, when you want to get inspired? Do you like dig deep on those, or do you do like a different genre or something else to inspire like your speculative work?
Can you answer it first?
Oh, me?
Yes.
I don't know. I read so much, right? And I read so much science fiction and fantasy, but I read romance, I read history. I read so much. So it's hard for me to say like, when I'm not feeling like writing. I will say for art, when I'm working on a painting, I think sometimes what I'll do is look at artists who really inspire me in the past and now. And like right now, someone who really, I have two artists who are current that I look at. One of them is Derek Adams and another one is Kehinde Wiley. And they're really different. The way that their styles are different. But I look at how they view the world from their viewpoint, and then also juxtapose what history has looked at versus what they're doing in contemporary art. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them, but I can go on if you're not, or if you want to know more. But Nick, go ahead, you have your hand up.
I can actually help answer this for you. I know when Will's not being creative, there's two things that he does.
Yeah.
So when you don't feel like you're creative in your writing, you tend to use other mediums of creativity to get things out. Because if it's not flowing in writing, it means it's something else will work for you at the time. So we'll like to switch back and forth between painting and writing a lot. So I have noticed that. But I also say this too: when you're not being creative, we get some really deep like questions being asked. You have conversations about deep life meaning things that just help you work on whatever is going on without realizing that's what you're doing. It's really interesting to see, like, Will needs a conversation sometimes, gets through a conversation, and then creativity starts flowing shortly thereafter. So it's really interesting. Your intellectual mind needs to be fed just as much as your creative side. And I think that's where, when you're being too creative, you need to intellectually fuel yourself as well.
Is that what we're doing right now?
I think
no,
so.
I'm not having a problem writing.
We're being used. I like it.
No, not at all. Because actually, I'm like on a roll. I just finished my play. I'm working on my short story that I'm going to submit in a month. So no, but
that's so cute.
Which is
the fact that Nick could answer that for you. That's very
disturbing. It's so cute and disturbing. He does know me. He knows if I eat cereal, he'll be like, "Oh, you're eating cereal. You're a little stressed, aren't you? What's wrong?"
That's
like,
I won't say it, but it's a very specific stress.
Yeah, it is a very specific stress.
Even my kids will be like, "Oh, he's eating cereal again?"
Oh, wow.
I never knew this until Nick pointed out. I was like, "Oh, you're observant." So Shingai, there is the question. Does that help you think of like?
It does.
Okay.
I think that I'm going to borrow from your answer, or Nick's answer for you, which is other modes of creating feel really good for me. Like I started a herbalism course, so I've been learning about herbs and plants, which has been really cool, and it's felt really creative and generative. And I've also been learning guitar this year. And just dipping into all these other creative avenues and spaces has actually been really good for my writing, because I think it means that there's less pressure with my writing. It's not like everything has to be expressed and come out through that. And that's, I think, less pressure makes it easier to write.
I 100% feel that, because I also play the guitar and the piano. And so sometimes I was talking to LP the other night, and I didn't feel like writing my story, but I knew I wanted to express something. And so I just wrote a bunch of songs on my guitar and just played them, finished like 3 songs, and I just put them away, everyone. But it was fun. And there was like no stress, because I'm not trying to be like a pop star. Now my next question. Say that. Well, I could, but like,
I said we. Like we
should start a band. Oh my God, yeah.
Sameem, do you sing?
Sameem, do you play anything?
I went through like a phase for like 3-4 years, like a decade ago, where I did a lot of like electronic composition, and I've written songs since I was like a teenager, and it comes and goes, but I never really do anything to completion. It's like Will, you were saying, it's just for me.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that.
Yeah, I love that. See, we could start a band. Nick, you have a beautiful voice.
No,
I was kidding. I know. Thank you. Wow, I was kidding.
Wow. We're both in agreement on this one.
Yeah. All right. So my next question is, I think about one of my heroes just as a human being, but also a literary hero, which is James Baldwin. And I love this quote where he says, artists are here to disturb the peace. And so I want to ask all of you, what do you want your art to do for yourself first? When you're creating and you're making your art, what do you want it to do for you first? And I'm going to start this one off with Nick. I need it. See, there you go. We're in sync.
Yeah, well, ironically, I was thinking earlier today that this is what I wanted to talk about on a podcast tonight. So you're just right up the vein of what I've been thinking about. So for me, when it comes to my writing and what I wanted to do for me is I want to write a version of myself that's better than what I am now. So all my main characters, even some of my side characters, have an attribute that I feel like I possess. And then I write a version of that with an inward reflection of that. So my current novel is me in a different situation. Really is what my main character is going through, and I really hyperanalyze their decisions and things like that.
I love it. Sameem?
What exactly was the question again? It was like, what do I want writing to do for me?
For you. Yeah, like when I quoted James Baldwin, and he said, artists are here to disturb this peace. And so what I want to know is, what do you want your art to do for you?
There's a lot. I think that I lean on it for, but I think one of the core things, especially with speculative fiction for me, is that what if that Shingai was mentioning. Like, I want it to answer my questions. And I want it to force me to think critically about not just the answers to those questions, but why I'm even asking them. Why is it important for me to know the answer to those questions? And how do I feel about like the outcome? I think I've written some stories where I'd answer the question and I was like, I don't like this. It's not meaningful for me. And I sort of put it away because I don't feel like I was able to answer it in a way that I wanted to. Yeah.
And Shingai, same question.
I really like the James Baldwin quote. I think that it speaks a lot to what my art is trying to do right now. I think Nina Simone's answer also about the role of the artist is to reflect the times is one that I keep going back to. And then Tony Cade Bambara said the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And I love that one a lot. So I think about like the Black radical artists who came before me, and I kind of look to them for guidance about what my work is here for. Yeah. And similar to Sameem, a lot of that is like the questions that I have about the world that we're in and trying to answer them. I don't think I answer them. I think I usually leave with more questions after writing a story, but I do engage with them in a way that makes me feel like, okay, at least they're no longer stuck inside my head. Yeah.
I love that. So now the next question is, what do you want your art to do for everyone else? And I'm going to start off with who wants to go. You guys can pick.
How about you?
Oh, jeez.
You didn't answer the first question, actually.
I know, because I'm the moderator. No one needs to do it for me.
No, moderator gets the answer as well.
We can moderate the moderator.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so I guess the first question, my art to me, for me, has always been about, my writing has always been about healing and coping with trauma. My art, when I paint or when I draw, well, you know what? Painting is different than I'm drawing. And I'll tell you why. Painting for me is always about exploring visually the world that I'm seeing through symbols. So like I did a painting on Uvalde, the shooting of Uvalde. And then I also am working on a painting about the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And I'm incorporating a lot of political imagery and a lot of imagery of women being in chains, because ultimately this has nothing to do with life. It actually has to do with the enslavement of women. And if 51% of your population is, their rights are taken away, it's only going to be in time everyone else's are, except for a certain group. For writing, it's always been about healing from trauma and coping with what was going on, especially when I was a child, especially how lonely or just awful it felt a lot of times when I was like a teenager and a kid. So that's what it does for me. What I hope that my art can do is make people question, and they don't even need to agree with me. Like, I'm the type of person, I'm learning. I'm okay with being wrong, right? Or I'm okay with people not liking my opinion. Because there's two different things. I feel like art is to be able to question our society, question the artist, and then question ourselves. So that's one thing I want people to really think about, depending on what I'm writing. Another part is I hope people feel connection. Because I really believe, that's what story does. Story can build connection and community. Because when you think about the stories that like moved you to want to become a writer, that to me is all about connectivity, right? And it's amazing how a novel that's been written by maybe someone who is so unlike you, on the surface, but then you read their work and they just touch you and you don't even know them, but you're reading them. And in there, you're knowing them. To me, that's really powerful. And so that's what I hope people take away. But, once again, you don't have control of how people are going to view your art. Some people might be vicious and not like you because of your stances or what you're believing. And to me, I think some things that are happening right now in our world, people won't like my opinions. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm not worried. So that answers that question. How do you want your creativity to view the world? Or what do you want the world to take out of your creativity?
Me?
Yeah. Or your writing, your art.
I think going back to the questions that I asked that like motivate me to write the stories, I think the reason why I end up asking those questions internally is because I'm not seeing anyone else address. It doesn't mean no one else is addressing them, but I don't see other people having that conversation. And like, it's not the only thing I write about, but I think a huge piece of it for me is like, what will the Muslim community and practices look like in the future? And like the far future, and what does that mean for how the community is today? Not to sort of like set a stake in the ground for like, this is where we're trying to go, but just to think through like, where is this taking us? What's going to happen? How do we deal with those types of issues? And I want to motivate more people to start asking those questions and having those conversations. Partly because it's interesting for me. Like, I don't practice, I'm agnostic, but I'm still super curious, especially for like my friends and family who are deeply religious and observant. I don't hear from them enough, like questioning what their future generations are going to do in different scenarios, given the way like technology is changing, given the way that like people could be living off Earth at some point in the next like 1,000 years. Like, what does that mean where we're going? So that's like one example, but just pushing people to question the reality that they're living in more and more.
Shingai, what about you?
That feels very apt. I think my answer about how my art is for me is similar to my answer about how my art is for other people, because I'm engaging with the questions that I have. I'm hoping that it like pushes other people to engage with questions more and not be afraid of them. Sameem mentioned specifically the Muslim community, so I'm going to say Black queers, and then also Kenyans, and I'll leave it there.
I love it. Nick?
I think I might have like a different style answer here. Please repeat the question so I fully understand it.
What do you want, now that we talked about like how your art affects you, like what you want it to do for you, right? What do you want your art to do for other people? What do you want your creativity to do for other people? What do you hope they take away?
So, I mean, for me, like a lot of what I focus on are stories that I can relate to, situations I can relate to. So I almost always will have a character that suffers from PTSD in some sort of way. I will have characters that have been over militarized and they have to challenge power and orders and things like that. Because I think that's a super important piece of how I was brought up in my early 20s in the military. Taboo things we don't talk about. We don't talk about mental health enough in this country, especially for men. And it gets even worse once it comes to minorities in the country as well, right? We don't talk about the challenges that people have to face when they're subjugated in certain ways, and how to overthrow systems and how to come to their own mindsets and things like that. So for me, what I want people to take away is like, I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel equipped with knowledge. You know, and in cliches, this is going to sound, because I hate saying have a hero, but like, I want my people to look at my characters and be like, this is how a hero would do it. I need to be that. You know, and it's all about self-learning and self-discovery along the way.
I love it. Now I'm going to go to my next question. So we talked about what creativity is. What do you do when you're not feeling creative, or how do you go seek it? So, and also like what our art does for ourselves, what do we want it to do for other people? So now my next question is, how do you make creativity abundant in your life? I'm going to go to Nick.
Yeah, I'm going to say I don't. I think this is what we all struggle with, right? Like whatever you have going on in life, no one has the ideal situation where creativity is abundant. And I think it goes to like, is your well filled or not? Like, do you have the energy? Do you have the capacity? Even if you have all the time in the world, you're going to have moments and times where like you just can't be creative and you've got to refill yourself. So like, it's a hard question to answer, but at the same time, like, I think this is something that everyone's going to struggle with at some point.
Sameem, same question.
I think the biggest thing that's helped me make this abundant is having creative community. And it's not always easy to do this just with the constraints of life. But I've found when I go through phases where I have creative friends that I'm able to interact with and meet on a regular basis, when I talk to you folks, like it's where I feel like, I don't know, I guess I'm a very like monkey see, monkey do type of person. Like if I surround myself with peers who are like doing awesome things, I'm going to be like, I want to be like them. I look up to you all. And so like, I feel like that's the biggest thing for me. The second thing goes back to what I was saying earlier, and this is going to make me just sound old, but like sleeping, like resting, like I feel like that's the core way that I am in denial about, but is the core way that I need to, the core thing I need to do to refill my cup on a regular basis.
I love it. Shingai?
I think definitely creative community. That's always been the place that I go to, like having Voodoonauts, having Clarion, and having y'all now. That's been really, really, really healing for my creative journey. And I'm also thinking about what we started with, the idea that creativity is not just in the writing, but can be in every aspect of your life. So I think that there is like a perspective shift there that also helps me when I start thinking about creativity in every aspect of my life. It creates abundance in my view of what creativity is and can be. Yeah.
So I guess I'll answer this question since I asked it. I am going to disagree with Nick. I feel, yeah, I know, big surprise. I feel like I'm two things. I feel like I'm constantly around creativity as far as the people I interact with because of what I do, right? Because like I work on set, or like I do hair in the salon, or like, you know, I'm doing fashion week. That is in essence being around creative people all the time. My friends are actors who I hang out at least 3 or 4 times a week. That's a different type of creative energy. And for me, if anything, I think when I always say I don't feel creative enough, it pushes me to be creative. It pushes me to find out how can I be creative, and it can be like in whatever avenue. So I do feel like I'm lucky that I'm in a bubble where I'm pretty much around creativity and creative people all day long. I don't work a desk job. I don't work for corporate America. Shut up. That's not true. I'm seeing them. If everyone could just see the comments in chat, but we're not going to discuss them.
We are.
Oh, we are not. So I feel lucky, basically. Nick, you had something to say?
Well, look, you're going to disagree with me. I'm going to disagree right back. Like, so I do feel like you are surrounded by creativity a lot, but because you're surrounded by it so much, like you have said it feels like a job. Like, oh, it's just a job. Like,
okay, whoa.
So
Let's
talk to me about this though, because you are surrounded by creative things and people all the time, but there are moments doing those things you don't feel creative.
No, let's roll back. When I say it's just a job, it's because I try not to make a big deal about who I'm working with and what I'm doing, because it's like what I do for work. So I'm used to it. So I downplay a lot of the stuff I do. In fact, I don't really talk about everything that I do because I'm like, yeah, it's like work. It's like what I do. And it's not that I don't love what I do, because I love what I do or I wouldn't do it anymore. But I just don't need to have people look at me with googly eyes about who I'm working with or what I'm working on. It makes me feel weird, and it makes me feel like I'm bragging, and I don't want to do that.
Okay. Satisfied.
Okay. So our next question, and this is going to relate to everyone. I want to talk about what you're excited about your own work. You know, what are you working on and what are you really excited about? Nick, you had something to say? You would like to go first?
Yeah, but I don't want to talk about how I'm excited about my work. Oh, I jumped the gun early there.
Okay, well, what do you want to talk about that you're excited about that fuels your creativity?
So I want to compliment Shingai here. I want to take this opportunity because Shingai is involved in stuff that I'm too afraid to be involved in, right? You do things where I'm like, whoa, that's way out of my comfort zone. And it's really inspiring because you look at things different than I do, than I've ever grown up with. So what excites me is hearing you talk how you do story structure, talk about stories. Like you're very much into like resistance movements and things like that. And I'm like, that's inspirational to me. So I just want to take that moment and say, hey, I'm excited for your next pieces of work because it challenges my way of thinking and fuels me in different ways that I need to take into consideration and write better with.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that.
I love that. Yeah, it's good that we inspire each other. But now we're going to go back to what's inspiring us about our own work. Nick?
So
you're starting there.
Yeah, what inspires me about my own work? I don't really know. I think I'm inspired by my own progress a lot of the times because I think it's been very rapid over the last few years. Obviously, just finished my MFA last year, but it for me, I'm actually seeing everything come through. Like everything's coming together, regardless of what the story is. And I'll talk about my current work in progress, though. This one it's hitting home a little bit due to some other recent changes in in my family structure, it's the story's resonating with me even more so when it comes to absentee parents in the home and things like that. And so writing this is actually therapeutic as of recent, and me realizing, oh, I've always had these feelings. Oh, I've always known this. Now it's just on the forefront and things like that. So for me, like, I'm inspired by my writing by self-discovery.
I love it. Shingai, what are you excited about in your own work? Or like, what are you excited about that you're working on right now?
I think I started a new novel, which is crazy.
Amazing.
I also finished a novelette that's going to be published at the Deadlands in September, and that's a big one. That was actually I was working on it through the end of last year, and it was my trying to process the genocide in a lot of ways. And also just, thinking about that. And then what else am I working on? I wrote a story from a child's perspective recently, and that was really fun. And I think that I have enough to put all together into a short story collection now, which I'm really excited about. So that's one of my big projects this year. And similar to Nick, all of it feels very from a place of vulnerability and a place of like, this is how I'm seeing the world. Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. Sameem, what are you excited about in your own work, or what are you excited that you're working on? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I'm working on this novel still. And I'm in the sort of like replotting, redrafting phase of it. And I think a huge part of me doesn't think I can do this. And so I'm sort of like excited to prove myself wrong. And to keep like bang my head against it. And part of the challenge is I tend to be a very like stream of conscious and like vibey, like writing on the vibes type of writer. And I don't think a lot ahead about plot. And I think that's worked all right for short stories. Because I can go back and rework the plot more easily there. But with a novel, particularly a murder mystery, there's just like a lot more planning and organization that I feel like I need to do and need to learn how to do. And I feel like there's been various points where I like wanted to back out. But I don't know, I'm excited that I'm like pushing forward and also just giving myself more like time and space for it. To rather than give up, like keep working on it for a longer period of time.
That's awesome.
Along these lines, we're talking about being creative and things like that. I want to know, and this is, to me, it's controversial, but I held a certain opinion, but do you guys have writing heroes? Yes or no? And then who it is, if you do.
I mean, I mentioned mine, James Baldwin.
That's a good hero to have.
I mean, to me, it would be James Baldwin, Octavia Butler, Zora Neale Hurston, Lee Bardugo. Adam Silvera, I would also, because that was like the first queer characters I've read. Daniel Jose Older. I can't believe I didn't mention him. I hope, edit that out, Marshall. Okay?
No, don't. Hi, Daniel.
Because I'm like a 15-year-old girl when Daniel's around. I'm like, oh, hi. Or I get like really weird and quiet.
He won't even listen to the interview that he did with them.
I won't. It's the only interview I've never listened to because I was so nervous.
Oh,
do you
so
know how,
good, though.
like, I literally work with people who would gag over, and I'm just like, oh, yeah, big deal. Beyonce, okay, yeah, she's cool. She's sweet. And then Daniel Jose Older, I'm like a teenage fan that's like, you know, mumbling stuff. Anyway, go ahead.
That's very sweet.
Sameem, do you have any writing heroes?
I feel like we just did an episode on this.
That's your canon. That's your canon.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of overlap. I mean, I think like the two that I've spent a lot of time on in my life have probably been like Octavia Butler and Griff Vonnegut, which I talked about a lot in that episode. But there's a ton. Like, and it might not be authors who like I might not have read their whole catalogs, but they've had stories that have like hit me and pushed me to think differently about my own writing. Like Charlie Jane Anders, Ken Liu. I've had stories that, like, especially when I was exploring like the art of short fiction, those were two authors where like really pushed reading their work really pushed me to think differently. Gosh, I feel like there's so many. I always blank at this point. N.K. Jemisin, for sure. I think like my head exploded when I read fifth season. Yeah, this is hard. There's so many that I'm forgetting now. But those are the ones that like come to mind.
I love it.
Shingai.
That's a good list. Can I push back and ask you what you mean by heroes?
Thank you. I love that you asked that because what do you define as a hero? Because I have my own definition of this word, and this is where it gets like controversial. Like, yeah. I don't believe that there are heroes. A hero to me is someone that is flawless in a sense. Now there are people who do heroic things. So like the term hero is like, this is like top tier, does all good no matter what to me. And then there's a lot of people that do heroic things. And so like, I just don't like the term. And this is a military thing where it's been overused for me in my life. Been said to me in ways that probably shouldn't have. So for me, like the term hero for me, I don't have a hero. Like, you know, I'll say that down there are writers and authors who are inspirational for me that I really hold high on my list here. Mm-hmm. But for this purpose is people that you look up to who inspire you in your writing and things like that.
Cool. Yeah. I think some of the people that I mentioned too during the canon episode, which is like Kai Miller, River Solomon, Octavia Butler, Toni Cade Bambara, Ivana Diambo, and then there's so many. There's like Amy Césaire. I think every writer who has opened up the possibilities for me, like has made me realize like that I could do more, has been an inspiration. Sameem even, because I just read his story, which was incredible. And I think is very permission giving, but we're going to talk about that next week. Yeah. All my homies who are writers, I'm just like, y'all are doing wild things. It's so cool.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, when it comes to heroes and inspirational authors, what is it about the people that you guys listed that you're trying to emulate and use in your own creative processes? Oh, and let me just back up here. Inspirational writers to me, because I'll answer this one as well. Right now, my number one, not number one. Their writing's inspiration, right? Philip C. Quantrill. He writes fantasy. He's been writing, he's like 15 books in the same world, and I can't get enough of it. And that's what I'd love to do is write something where the story's always feeling like I'm in a new world, yet it's familiar and things like that. And that's what I'm trying to do with this current series. It's like R.A. Salvatore, who writes in the Forgotten Realm series from Dritz and Dungeons and Dragons. It's Terry Brooks in his Shannara series and things like that. Writing big, expansive worlds where there's endless stories to tell. And those are just a few of the authors that inspire me to what I want to do. Now, the question is, of those authors, what are you trying to pull from them for your own creativeness? Will?
Well, I'm going to go back to our canon episode, which I don't feel like I pull anything from them because they're so good. I think I just like them for what they did.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and answer this for you yet again. I know that one of your stories, your books, your works, I know you were finally coming over Six of Crows and Lee Bardugo to emulate some of the stuff that she has done in those books.
Sure, but it's actually that one's changed so much. It's totally different structure. That heist is going to happen in the next book after I write the first one.
Oh, so you still studied it and you plan on using it. Okay. Thank you for that answer.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sameem?
I don't know. I feel like I kind of have the same answer as well. But you don't know me well enough yet to tell me I'm wrong. I don't think I like usually consciously try to emulate the work. I feel like if I read something that gives me energy to want to create myself, it's not necessarily that was something that I wanted to emulate. It was more like the fascination of the ability for me to get lost is like, how do I give that back? And it's like I was saying earlier, it's not just with writing, like going to a concert and the way that being at a concert, even if it's like not my favorite band or anything like that, but it removes you from reality for that like hour or so. And I feel like writing that hits me hard does that too. And then also writing that just like forces me to think differently about my own preconceived notions about a genre. Like another author I love is Indra Das. And the book The Devourers, like, it's pretty gory, and I hate gore. I can't stand gore. But it's simultaneously like horrific and gory, but the most beautiful book I've ever read. And I was like, how did you do that at the same time? Like, write such like vivid gore with the most like beautiful language. And it just like reset my mind a little bit. I'm not going to try to write something like that ever, probably. But it probably taught me something.
That's such a great book, by the way. I love it. Where are they? What else have they been writing?
I think they had another book come out last year, I want to say.
Oh, I never saw it. All right, I'm going to look it up. Thanks. Shingai.
They also have a lot of short fiction.
I need to check them out. That was a very high recommendation. So I think listening to myself talk over the last hour, I've realized that I keep coming back to the word permission. And I think writers who give me permission make me feel like I can give permission in my own writing, like just expanding the realms of what is possible. And I actually just wanted to read y'all a paragraph from the last thing that I read that blew my mind. It's a writer who I didn't mention, but Elogosa, who is a Nigerian queer writer. Definitely should get on them. They're really cool. And this is an essay called Walk Worthy. And they say, writing the best work of my life thus far was an exercise in asserting my own worth. Am I worth telling audacious stories? Yes. Sometimes I still can't believe how hard it was to believe myself worthy of the kind of freedom I know is possible. I can't believe how long it took to believe myself worthy of my own imagination. And it was just like, it was really cool for me because I'm constantly thinking about freedom for everyone, but thinking of myself as worthy of the freedoms that I imagine for everyone, thinking of myself as worthy of the freedoms that I am inserting into my stories. Like, yeah, I deserve to live a slow life. And I want everyone to live a slow life if it's possible and if it's what they desire. And I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that's what I thought about.
That's awesome.
Can I just say that I think the way that I heard that, and maybe I didn't interpret it right, but for me, it was also the freedom to use language the way you want to use it out of the confines of expectations.
Yes.
And for me, I think when I understood that about myself, that I could write this however I want to, and mix language however I wanted to, that opened up the floodgates for me to like write and have the confidence to write how I wanted to write and share how I wanted to share, without feeling like I needed to write for this specific group of people who needed to like my work for it to go anywhere. And the freedom from that was huge.
That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so my last question for everyone is, what keeps you creative? What keeps you creating? Creative or creating, whatever you'd like. Nick, we'll start with you since you're the founder.
I don't like how you keep bringing that up, but here I am. Clearly, couldn't do it by myself because I brought everybody else on that knows more than me. So for me, I mean, I'm no expert, but you guys are. What keeps me creative or creating are the endless amounts of stories you can tell.
I love it. Shingai.
That's a great answer. I don't know how to top that.
This is not a competition. You guys are the experts. I'm not.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless. And I think that makes it so much more fun. Because you can, and like Sameem said earlier, you can do anything. And I think once you realize that almost all of the rules are made up and it's all your playground, why would you ever stop creating? Yeah.
I love that. Sameem?
I love both those answers. I think the one thing I'd add is just what keeps me creating is like both the burden and the blessing of existence, like having to process all of that, whether it's pain or joy, and trying to make sense of it. Whether that means coherent sense that you can communicate to someone else, or just raw expression that you felt like getting out that is for no one but for you, and it's not even for you later, it's for you in the moment. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, thank you so much, Nick.
What keeps you being creative and or creating?
Because it brings me joy. That's why. It makes me happy. And I think we should do things that make us happy.
And this has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing. You can find us at justkeepwriting.org. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to any of us on our social medias, and please jump in our Just Keep Writing Discord channel. Links to all of that is in the show notes. Lastly, please support our show by going to patreon.com/justkeepwriting. We offer daily writing prompts, early access to podcast episodes, and much more. Thanks for listening, and just keep writing.